We all die sooner or later. So what comes after? Atheists tend to give a clean answer. Nothing. When the body goes, that's it. Lights out. End of story. Many religious traditions go in the opposite direction. There's an afterlife, often eternal, and how you live right now is basically your one shot at determining whether that's going to be a nice place to be or not so much. And then Buddhism comes along, doing its very on-brand middle way thing and says something like, yes, there is something after death. In fact, there's quite a lot. But also, if you play your cards right, eventually, no. Which might sound a bit unsettling at first, or depending on your week, incredibly relieving. Welcome back to A Cup of Dhamma. Today we're talking about rebirth, one of the most fascinating, most misunderstood, and let's be honest, most eyebrow-raising topics in all of Buddhism. Grab a warm drink and let's dive straight in. Recently, I told someone that though I don't have the evidence myself, I am about 99.9% convinced that there is rebirth. And this person says, oh, me too. I had this one experience where I had a flashback to a past life, and basically I don't even have a choice in the matter. I have to believe it. I'm totally convinced. But I don't usually say it out loud to people because they'll think I'm a weirdo. And yes, loudly declaring, hello, I think we're all reborn, and wondering whether someone's toddler might be their grandmother in a new body is not something that would usually go down well. We can expect people to imperceptibly shift away from us and give us the side eye. But in the comfort of our own four walls, let's use it as a working hypothesis. Look at what the Buddha actually said. Consider the evidence and each make up our own minds. Looking at the history of the concept, rebirth wasn't actually always considered a fringe or eccentric idea. In ancient Greece, Pythagoras, Plato, and their followers took the transmigration of souls entirely seriously. It was also part of the worldview of many ancient cultures: Indian, Celtic, Inuit, some North American, in ways we have unfortunately largely forgotten. In the Christian tradition, early church fathers associated with teachings on the pre-existence of souls had their works condemned and banned around 553 CE during the Second Council of Constantinople. It's a contested piece of history. Scholars debate exactly what was and wasn't formally declared, but it broadly marks the point at which these ideas stopped being discussable within Christianity. An entire dimension of thinking about death and the soul was effectively closed down for over 1,000 years in the Western world. And we're only fairly recently beginning to ask those questions again. Some scientific work has also been done on rebirth that really is worth knowing about. Dr. Ian Stevenson was a professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, and his work is frequently referenced by Ajahn Brahm in his talks. His successor in this field is Jim Tucker, a former child psychiatrist. And Stevenson spent 40 years investigating over 3,000 cases of children who claimed to remember previous lives. He documented cases where children described in precise detail people, places, and events from past lives. In some cases, there were birthmarks or other physical marks corresponding to wounds on the previous personality, often wounds that had led to their death. And these children weren't claiming to have been themselves in a previous life in any simple sense. Girls had been men, boys had been women, identities crossed freely. His research is controversial, as is to be expected, and has not been accepted by mainstream science. There was criticism around his methodology, around potential information leakage, and so on. But Stevenson was very circumspect and careful around his claims. His research has not been disproved. It has mostly just been set aside, which again is entirely to be expected. One aspect of the teaching of rebirth in Buddhism that often gets overlooked, for those who develop deep enough concentration and insight, remembering past lives goes from being taken on faith to becoming a direct experience. The Buddha described his own experience very clearly. On the night of his awakening, the first of the 3 great knowledges he gained was recollecting that he had in fact lived not once, but gone through many previous lives and saw them in great detail. The second was seeing the pattern of all beings dying and being reborn throughout the cosmos and understanding the connection between their actions and where they ended up. It was seeing this, seeing rebirth directly, that served as the empirical basis for what became the Four Noble Truths. The suffering of countless lives, repeating without beginning, was what prompted the question, why? And the answer to that question became the Dhamma. In the Pali Canon, the Jataka tales tell over 500 stories of the Buddha's past lives. The more straightforwardly doctrinal sections of the canon describe around 9 past lives in detail. Either way, recollection of past lives is clearly not incidental to the teaching, it is foundational to it. The capacity to recall past lives is attributed to highly developed meditators more broadly. For them, rebirth is something they've confirmed via direct subjective experience, which means by the same logic, it's something every one of us has the potential to see for ourselves if we put in the work. Ajahn Brahm has hinted at his own experiences. He describes how in deep meditation, the mind becomes so empowered that you can begin to ask it simple questions like, what is my earliest memory? And it answers, not by thinking, but by going there. He recalls that suddenly, when he asked this question, a smell came into his nose, which he immediately identified as the smell of his pram. And that olfactory detail is really striking because in the first few weeks of life, a baby's sense of smell is what is most prominently developing. He was back in his pram as a 3 or 4-week-old baby. And from there, he says, you can go further back. You can re-experience being in the womb. You feel it, you know it is you with the same degree of certainty, or perhaps more, than anything in ordinary experience. And from there, you can keep going backwards. Monastics in the Thai forest tradition do have a rule about this. They generally are not supposed to broadcast their own past life experiences casually. It isn't helpful to ordinary practitioners and can invite all kinds of unhelpful comparisons and distractions. So the ajahns tend to stay quiet about it, but when asked directly, they are quite clear. Before we go further, let's be very clear about what rebirth in Buddhism actually means, because it is not what most people imagine. When most people hear rebirth or reincarnation, they imagine a fixed soul, some essential, unchanging you, moving from one body to the next, like changing flats, same person, new address. Around the Buddha's time and in the area where he was active, this idea was already present, particularly in the Brahmanical tradition where the Atman, an eternal, unchanging soul, was thought to transmigrate from life to life. Some other traditions experimented with more fluid notions of a self that evolves across lives, but on the whole they still assumed something persisted. The Buddha diverged from this quite deliberately and taught that rebirth unfolds through causal processes, dependent origination, without any permanent or underlying soul. There is continuity, but nothing you can point to and say, this is the self that travels on. There is no fixed self to transmigrate. What we refer to as a person is made up of 5 aggregates or heaps, the khandhas, as form, the body, feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Perception, so labeling and categorizing of things. Mental formations, which is a whole heap of things like thoughts, habits, intentions, and consciousness. At death, only form, the body, falls away along with the physical sense organs. What keeps going is a stream of the other four khandhas, like a domino effect, vastly complicated with an enormous number of factors determining which domino falls next and where. But one single domino doesn't travel from here to there. The process continues. The entity does not. This process is depicted as samsara, the wheel of birth, aging, illness, suffering, death. And then the whole thing starts again with rebirth. It's also called the bhava chakra, the wheel of becoming, one of the most vivid images in all of Buddhist art. At the center are three forces that keep everything turning: craving, aversion, and ignorance, often depicted as a pig, a snake, and a rooster, each biting the tail of the next. Around them are the 6 realms of existence, showing the different forms that conditioned existence can take, from states of deep suffering to states of great pleasure. And encircling that is the chain of dependent origination, illustrating how, step by step, this whole cycle keeps recreating itself. The entire wheel is held in the jaws of Yama, the Lord of Death, reminding us that everything within it is impermanent and subject to change. And outside the wheel, pointing the way out, stands the Buddha going, "Hey, you can step off this hamster wheel, you know. Over here is liberation." The spark that keeps the mental aggregates, 4 of the 5 khandhas, flowing is craving, tanha. And the Buddha identified 3 specific types that fuel rebirth, which you might remember from the video about suffering. Craving for sensory pleasure, which keeps pulling us back towards the sense world because we want more of what it offers. Craving for becoming, the will to exist, to continue in a specific way, to have a next life. And craving for non-becoming, the desire to escape, to dismantle, to annihilate. This last one is worth highlighting. Even wanting to get away is still wanting, and wanting in any direction is still fuel. You cannot crave your way out of this cycle. When craving takes hold and becomes clinging, upadana, which is literally fuel or sustenance, that actively powers becoming. As long as that process continues, the stream of the 4 mental khandhas keeps meeting its objects, keeps arising, finding new pairings with name and form. The wheel keeps turning. One of the things that strikes people most when they first encounter Buddhist cosmology is the sheer scale of time involved. The Pali word for aeon is kappa. 1 kappa is the lifespan of a cosmological world system. The Buddha described how long a great aeon is with a vivid analogy. Imagine a mountain of solid granite. A man comes along once every 100 years and strokes it once with a silk cloth. The mountain would wear away before a great aeon had passed. In Buddhist cosmology, world systems arise and are destroyed and arise again infinitely. A human lifespan in that picture is pretty small. The Buddha was fairly clear. We have all already lived countless lives. Not 10, not 100, countless. After his awakening, he tried to find the beginning of this process, to trace the stream back to its source. He couldn't find one. People who can only recall back to around 40 aeons are considered to have rather limited recollection of their lives. 40 aeons. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast on Tuesday. In the Asu Sutta, the Tears Sutta, he asked his monks, which is greater, the tears you have shed while wandering through this long journey of rebirth, crying over what you've lost, or the water in the 4 great oceans? The tears are greater. He lists what we have wept over again and again. the death of a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter, loss of relatives, loss of wealth, loss of health, all of it repeated endlessly, life after life. And it doesn't stop there. He says, if a single person were to wander on for just one great aeon, and someone were to collect all the bones that person left behind, the pile would be as large as Mount Vapula. I don't know how high that mountain is exactly, but that amounts to a lot of bones for just one person. And in another teaching, the blood that has been spilled across countless lives, in executions and slaughters, in the violence of existence, is greater than the water in the 4 great oceans. Tears greater than the oceans, blood greater than the oceans, bones as high as a mountain, from just one person, in a fraction of beginningless time. The Buddha was not trying to depress his audience, or maybe a little bit, because he was trying to wake them up. And he ends each of these teachings the same way. It's enough to become disenchanted with all formations, enough to become dispassionate, enough to be released. The consciousness stream that latches onto a new life is not a blank slate. It carries anusaya, subliminal tendencies, imprints from past lives, habits, inclinations, the accumulated color of a long, long history. These are conditions for the new life before the new life has even properly begun. Think of your stream of consciousness as having a particular color, shaped by the habitual tone of your mind across this lifetime and previous ones, how you saw the world, how you navigated it, what you were striving for, what you kept running toward and away from. All of that bleeds into the color, and the color travels with the stream into whatever comes next. Marcus Aurelius was definitely onto something when he said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. So well said and so poignant. Stevenson's research revealed something that already stretches our ordinary assumptions, that a child of one sex could apparently have been someone of the opposite sex in a recalled past life. Boys who had been women, girls who had been men, very much in line with the Buddhist teaching of anatta, not self. Identity is considerably more fluid across lives than we usually imagine. And again, Buddhism goes much further than that. You are not limited to being reborn as a human. There are 6 realms within the desire realm, Kamaloka. The hell realms, the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, the human realm, the asura realm, and the heavenly deva realms. Each reflects a particular quality of mind, a particular accumulation of causes and conditions. You can be reborn as an animal, as a being in one of the hell realms, as a hungry ghost, a pitta. You can also be reborn as a deva, a light being, something not entirely unlike what other traditions might call an angel, in one of the heavenly realms. The full picture of Buddhist cosmology is extraordinarily rich, and we will cover it properly in its own video. 2 things determine where and how rebirth happens: your aspiration and your karma. Aspiration is what you want. Ajahn Brahm's example is a trip to Paris. I want to go to Paris is your aspiration, and Kamma is your currency, your money for the plane ticket to Paris. Both matter. The direction of your wanting and the weight of your accumulated actions together shape what comes next. Remember Ajahn Lee talking about only a consciousness with sufficient merit being able to gain a foothold within a human fetus? Merit is basically good karma currency. So rebirth and karma are inextricably intertwined. And within the human realm, the specific location, family, and circumstances you're born into can also be shaped by your attachments and unfinished business. Some ajahns have suggested that groups of people are sometimes reborn in close proximity to each other, that strong connections of love, resentment, or unresolved feeling can pull streams of consciousness back together across lives, which is both beautiful and slightly alarming depending on who you're thinking about right now. This also provides a Buddhist framework for something many people experience, that immediate, inexplicable sense of recognition when you meet someone for the first time. The feeling that the connection is older than this life. Given the sheer number of lives we've apparently all lived, and the tendency of connected streams to find each other again, this is not only possible, it's practically inevitable. Rebirth shifts many things into a new light. If we zoom out from one lifetime onto countless ones, specific things take on a new meaning. For example, this also puts death into an interesting new perspective. Death is not the end-all of everything. It is, in the Buddhist view, not unimportant. It's certainly a radical transformation, a moment when Rupa falls away and everything changes, but it is not the full stop most of us imagine it to be at all. More like one of countless commas in an endless sentence. It is one transition in a process that has been going on for longer than anyone can calculate and will continue to do so. This is not meant to minimize grief, because those of us that are left behind when a person dies, we experience separation and loss, not death. And loss hurts a lot. What matters here is that rebirth isn't a simple ledger system where all your good deeds and bad deeds are tallied up and you're assigned a destination. The state of mind in any given moment is extremely important in Buddhism. And that goes especially for the moment of death. The state of mind in that moment carries enormous weight. Nobody does only good or bad things across a life, right? We all do both. But if at the moment of death we turn towards ill will, fear, confusion, craving, even if we've lived a largely virtuous life, that state of mind can pull the stream in a difficult direction. Conversely, even if there is heavy karma from the past, a mind that turns towards clarity, letting go, and goodwill at death can find a better footing, and bad karma is never gone, but delayed. There's no judge, no external being allocating us our next position. It's the quality of mind in that moment that creates the conditions for the next arising. Like planting a seed. Plant a chili seed, get a chili tree. Plant a lavender seed, get a lavender tree. The cause and effect is that direct, which is why the tradition pays such careful attention to death, and why being present with the dying, encouraging calm, letting go, and an expansive, positive state of mind wherever possible, is considered a genuine act of kindness and care. A confused, emotionally turbulent, highly attached death is considered genuinely unfortunate, not as a punishment, but as a condition. And a clear, peaceful, open death, supported by the Dhamma, by practice, is considered a great gift. This is also why practice matters so much now and not just at the end. The habits of mind we cultivate across a lifetime are the habits of mind that are most likely to be present in that moment. Ajahn Chah described the relationship between birth and death in a way that only he could. Our birth and death are just one thing. It's a little funny to see how at death people are so tearful and sad, and at birth how happy and delighted. It's delusion. I think if you really want to cry, then it would be better to do so when someone is born. Cry at the root, for if there were no birth, there would be no death. Birth is the root, death is the fruit. The way to address death is to stop planting the seed, which is not, of course, a reason to be sad at births. It's a reason to be awake to what is happening and what the opportunity here is. And there's also a new angle on the justice question that the concept of rebirth raises. If there is only one life, one single roll of the dice determining everything about where you're born, to whom, in what circumstances, With what body and mind? The world looks profoundly unjust. Some people get extraordinarily difficult starting positions through no apparent fault of their own. Looking across the rebirth system, though, across countless lives shaped by Kamma, it begins to look considerably more just. Not comfortable, not easy, just. We create our own happiness, our own suffering, our own future, and our own lives right now in this moment. Ajahn Brahm calls this not a punishment system, but a learning opportunity, sometimes in the form of a kick in the butt that each turn on the merry-go-round of samsara offers us. Now, samsara isn't all bad. It can actually be quite enjoyable at times. There are pleasant states, even whole realms of existence that feel good, sometimes very good. And there are stories in the tradition of beings getting so comfortable in a particular form of life that they stay there again and again. For example, the story of a monk who lived around 500 lifetimes as a dog because he enjoyed the canine lifestyle so much. Which is, if we're honest, rather relatable. No commitments, no busy schedule. We get attached to what feels nice. But the catch is that even the wonderful, pleasant lifetimes are impermanent. You coast into a heavenly realm on the merit of a virtuous life, enjoy yourself thoroughly, and then the merit runs out and back down you go. You are never safe from suffering because nothing is stable or reliable. Rebirth is a bit like a cosmic snakes and ladders, except the board is enormous and each of us is playing without remembering our previous moves. And I've heard Ajahns refer to this whole game more than once as a bit of a sick joke in that respect. It's aimless, going round and round. In this picture of the endless, somewhat exhausting wheel, the question of why human birth is considered so precious becomes very clear. The human realm sits in a particular sweet spot. We have just enough suffering to want to transcend our situation, but not so much that we are completely crushed by it. We have the capacity for self-reflection, the drive to develop, and access to the Dhamma. The building blocks are already in place. Other realms don't offer this. The heavenly Deva realms are pleasant, very pleasant, but pleasure is not particularly character building. If things are nice enough, you don't tend to ask the hard questions. And the lower realms, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, the hell realms, are so preoccupied with immediate survival or suffering that sustained reflection isn't usually possible. The human realm is the sweet spot, which is why the tradition treats human birth as precious, not something to be squandered on the pursuit of slightly nicer experiences within the same wheel. Some people raise an objection. If rebirth is real, why are there so many more people now than there used to be? Where are all the extra ones coming from? Consciousness in the Buddhist view is not limited to humans. It includes bacteria, microorganisms, animals of every kind, beings in other realms, including realms without physical bodies at all. There is an almost incomprehensible reservoir of consciousness flowing through all the realms of existence at any given moment. As the world system matures and conditions become more conducive to reflective consciousness, a gradual shift from lower realms toward the human realm is to be expected. The number increasing is not a problem for the theory. It is, if anything, exactly what you'd predict. Which brings us to the end of the story, or rather the end of the story of endlessly repeating stories. Rebirth ends with the attainment of Nibbāna. When craving is fully extinguished, when there is no more fuel, no more wanting, no more will to become again, the stream finds no new foothold, and the wheel stops. For an arahant, someone who has fully realized awakening, there is a state described in the canon as parinibbāna, which occurs at physical death. The aggregates disperse. all of them, not just the material one. The stream does not continue. Total liberation from samsara, from the wheel of birth, aging, illness, suffering, and death. No more bones, no more oceans of tears, no more cosmic snakes and ladders. Nibbāna is the only place that is not conditioned, that is not within space or time, and thus does not need to be maintained. Everywhere else, we need to constantly keep working away to keep our good karma stocked up. Otherwise, we slide right back down. Only Nibbāna offers a place where we can put our feet up and do nothing at all, where we are safe. The doing has stopped. And given what we've covered today, the tears, the blood, the bones, the endless wheel stopping sounds, if anything, like a very well-earned rest. Rebirth in the Buddhist picture is not a comforting fairy tale about souls moving peacefully from life to life. It's a vast, serious, somewhat vertigo-inducing teaching about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to craving and karma across timescales we can barely imagine. It is also, in a strange way, deeply motivating, because if this is the situation, if we have indeed been cycling and recycling through existence for longer than anyone can calculate, shedding tears that outnumber the oceans, then the opportunity that a human life represents is genuinely extraordinary. In Buddhism, we carry the responsibility. We create our own happiness, our own suffering, our own future, right now in this moment. The path has been laid out. The only question is whether we use it. The wheel keeps turning, but for now we'll pause right here. See you next time.